I had one of those moments recently where a lot of things came together in my brain to make sense of an event that my child mind couldn't properly comprehend at the time. So, my mom was born and raised in the UK, but she is of South Asian descent, and since I'm mixed, she tries really hard to make sure I'm in touch with my culture. This meant that, as a child, we made a lot of frequent visits back home. It's like every summer I can remember was spent there, and then it suddenly just stopped after this incident. My mom's family back home live in an extremely rural part of the country. There's a lot of poverty surrounding our family home, so we rarely left our relatively nice part of the village. I was never allowed out to explore, and coming from a concrete jungle that is London, I was always so curious. I'm going to explain what happened on this particular day the way I remembered experiencing it, and then I'll explain what I failed to realize at the time. I was 8. One of my uncles from a neighboring village would often visit with his children, and when they did, my mom would let me go with them to a small hut-like shop that sold sweets and snacks like 15 minutes away from the family home. My cousins were 11 and 19, both male, and it was broad daylight. To get to the shop, we walked through a small DIY road, and on both sides is what I would call the jungle. It was basically just lots of trees and bushes as far as you can see. You can't really see anything beyond the trees, it's just a lot of greenery. I'm mixed with East Asian, and I definitely get my looks from my dad's side, so being an obvious foreigner in a rural part of back home meant that I was pretty used to strangers staring and asking me questions. I was also used to creepy men that would tell me that I was beautiful because I have pale skin. My mom warned me about these men and made sure that I knew to stay away from them. So the road to the hut was paved with creepy people making creepy comments and my cousins basically telling them to leave me alone in less pleasant terms. There was also a group of young guys. Some of them had motorbikes and some were just chilling. One of them waved at me and he seemed friendly enough, and I had met so many people that my mom was convinced that I must remember them from last time that I had zero recollection of, so I just waved back and went about my day. Once we got to the hut, we immediately started losing our self-control with the snacks. The owner was super friendly, and he let us try a bunch of sweets that he had, and he also had kulfi ice cream for the first time. I distinctly remember being really excited because my mom and one of the ladies that worked as a cook both loved kulfi ice cream, so I thought it would be a nice surprise for them. I asked for 3, and the nice guy gave me 4, and so my hands were full, and they were quickly melting. And he told me to run, go home quickly, quickly. I told my cousins I would get a running start, and once they finished, they could catch up. I would still be in their line of sight, plus it was daylight and it was a busy road. I started running back. There were a few older aunties stood up at the top of the road, and something about their presence gave me a sense of security. I felt a lot safer knowing that they were there, and paired with the fact that my cousins were able to see me clearly, I felt comfortable enough to just walk back leisurely, minding my own business, eating my ice cream. I passed the group of guys, and the one that waved at me came over to me. He said I was X and so-and-so's niece, right? X being my uncle. And he basically took one of my ice creams and said, "She got an ice cream for Mama." Mama means uncle in our language, and so I just assumed he was a friend of my uncle's. He asked me when I arrived and how I was finding the country. He was so friendly and he didn't look like a stereotypical creep. When I said that I was going to go home, he said, "Why don't you let Uncle take you? You can ride on my motorbike." I think that's when something clicked in my mind that he maybe wasn't the friendly uncle I thought he was. That's also when I realized I was pretty much circled in and was surrounded by the group. That's also when I realized I couldn't see my cousins or the group of old ladies, which also meant that they probably couldn't see me. I wish I could explain in words how helpless and afraid I was. I had all the threats in the world explained to me by my mom, in a country where I knew I was vulnerable, and had to be cautious and still managed to find myself in a dangerous situation. Luckily, my cousins came running and shouting, probably because I was their responsibility, and the guy ran off into the jungle. This creeped me out because there was nothing in the jungle. It was just trees as far as I could see, and I knew that it would be nearly impossible to find them in all of that. We caused quite the scene, and the villagers seemed to react as if they were already on edge. When we told my family what happened, I was basically on house arrest, and my mom refused to let me out of her sight. I was pretty shook up about the whole situation, and so honestly, I was kind of grateful for that. I put it down to my paranoia, but at the time, I would get overwhelming feelings of being watched. Our village is quite small, like, amongst them, it's an everyone knows everyone sort of thing. My uncle is also a big community figure, and he's very well known amongst the villagers, which is why the men probably put two and two together that I was his niece. Having foreign family over is usually a pretty big deal, and having a niece that is mixed race was also a very big deal. I'm sure word got around. He realized that there was a group of men on motorbikes who would frequently go past our house. They stayed a decent distance from our home, though, and that they weren't anyone we would have known. It's creepy to think about now, the lengths that they were going to. A couple of days before we were due to fly back, I had my second, last, and worst encounter with this particular friendly uncle. It was night, and it was like every other night where we would play board games or card games in the front room. Because it was so hot, I went to my bedroom and I was playing on my Nintendo DS, when I saw, out of the corner of my eye, someone at the window, staring directly at me. It was him. The worst part is that he had the most creepy, sick, and twisted smile I'd ever seen. He put a finger to his lips, but I did the literal opposite and started screaming hysterically. I had been on edge since the ice cream incident, so what might seem like an overreaction was just my natural response. I can't really tell you what happened next because no one had ever told me. My very large uncle and also his very large friends are not known to be the friendliest of people, but I was told he was dealt with and that he would never bother me again. We recently received a wedding film from one of my cousin's weddings, and part of the film was her leaving to get to the venue, and I noticed that the jungle was no longer there. It had basically been cut out. For the first time, I could see beyond the greenery. That's when my mom explained to me that my uncle had it cut down not long after that particular visit because of the head cutters. It sounds even more sinister in my native language. My entire life, I've wondered what would have happened to me if I had got on that motorbike, but now I know with reasonable certainty what his intentions were. During that time, a gang had been kidnapping beggar children. It took a while for the village to realize because it's not unusual for beggar children to go missing, but when we were there, people were vaguely aware that it was becoming a trend. A couple of months later, a head was found. It became known in our village, but people tried to keep it quiet to avoid getting a bad name. The problem went away once a lot of the greenery was cut down, so there was nowhere left to hide, but it's also when they realized the magnitude of what had happened. The weird thing is, I've known about the head cutters for a while. I knew it was something that had occurred in our village, but for some reason, until recently, I never put two and two together. But now that I have, I think often about what nearly happened to me, but more importantly, what happened to a handful of children in our little village. I think about that fact that, beyond our relatively small circle, no one thinks about them, and no one is haunted by their deaths. So when I was in high school, I wasn't a very hard-working student. I wasn't a troublemaker, but I was an incredibly lazy girl, working just the minimum so that my parents wouldn't get angry. I've always had some kind of easiness regarding schoolwork and never knew what it truly meant to make any efforts. So I spent all of my classes drawing on my copybooks without many consequences. My junior year's math teacher, who was seen by everyone as uptight but very caring, was pretty upset about this, as were many of my previous teachers. He wanted me to work harder. I wasn't bad at maths. I was around 13 or 14 out of 20. I'm French, but I assume this is like a B or a B-, but sometimes my grades would be very low. During a teacher/parent meeting, he told my mom that I was wasting my capacities, that it was infuriating how much I was lazy. My mom then replied that she agreed with him and that she wouldn't blame him for pushing me harder and for punishing me if it was for making me work harder. And from this day on, he did exactly what she told. In every math class, he would always question me first before everyone else and was always sitting next to me when we were doing exercises. During the test, he was always telling me, "You can do it, Elisa." It made me incredibly uncomfortable because at this age, no one wants to be the attention's focus. My classmates started to realize that my math teacher was a little obsessed with me and were teasing me a lot about this. The last class before Christmas break, the math teacher threw a little surprise Christmas party. It was very nice, but he gave us chocolates and mock champagne. We had a lot of fun. During the party, he poured me another glass of mock champagne, telling me that I deserved it because I was doing better. And it was true, because all of that attention I was forced to work, so my grades were around 15 to 16 out of 20, which I think is like having an A- or an A. I accepted it, but didn't drink it entirely. I have diabetes and already had too much chocolate. But during the next class, I was feeling really bad. I almost fainted and finished my last day of school before Christmas in the nurse's office. At that time, I wouldn't even think it was because of the alcohol-free champagne. I thought this was due to my diabetes, that I indeed had too much chocolate, even if it didn't look like my usual crisis. A few weeks later, my class threw some kind of charity event. It was a class project and we were very proud. In my country, we don't have proms, so it was our occasion to wear pretty formal clothes and to dance together. The math teacher was invited and he was helping some of the boys to tend the bar. He served me an alcohol-free cocktail, but before I could drink it, a classmate of mine, Flora, poured me some vodka in it, even though it was forbidden to bring alcohol to the event. I was mad because with my diabetes, I couldn't drink alcohol, so I told her that she could just throw the cocktail out. At the time, I thought that she did, but now when I think about it, I wonder if she didn't choose to drink it instead. The event ended pretty badly because of the alcohol Flora had brought. Some guys were very drunk. They started breaking things, and Flora passed out because of all the alcohol she had, and this ended the event. Flora had been admitted to the hospital because her coma was pretty severe, and we spent the next day being lectured by all the teachers of the school. Flora got expelled from the school and never went again. I was very upset with her because of her. Every event would now be forbidden and our project was a failure, and we gave a very bad image to the association that we were raising funds for, so I kind of ghosted her and never asked if she was doing better. Now, I feel bad about this, but at that time, I was immature. But because of that, I will never know if she was ill because of the alcohol or because of my cocktail. A few weeks later, I failed a math test. It had been a long time since I failed a math test, and the math teacher was very angry. He yelled at me in front of everyone, saying how much of a disappointment I was, that I was hopeless, and that I would just end up living in a cardboard box under a bridge. Something was off. I was feeling it. He had a very weird look in his eyes. It chilled me, and I couldn't help it, and I started crying. He calmed down a bit and said that he would just give me an hour of detention, during which I'll copy my lesson. I was a little surprised because normally detention is for bad behavior, not for bad grades, but just a little relieved because it was a small punishment. My parents would never know. Indeed, I lived kind of far from the high school, and there was only one bus every night between my high school and my home at 5 p.m. Because of that, even when I finished at 4 p.m., I would never actually go home before 5 p.m., and when I've had detention between 4 and 5, my parents thankfully would never know. But then when he officially gave me the detention hour, he said that he wanted to be personally present during my detention and that the only possible hour was during 5 p.m. and 6 p.m. I was really nervous because I would have to tell my parents to come get me at 6 p.m. and then they would know everything. As I said earlier, I wasn't a troublemaker, so at first I planned to go to the detention hour, but during the day, my friends and I talked a lot about it and I was feeling more rebellious because of the sensation of being supported by my friends. So I decided not to tell my parents that I was in detention and that one of my friends would pick me up at 6 p.m. and drive me home. At 5 p.m., when heading towards the detention room, I was angry, mumbling that it wasn't fair to be in detention because of only one bad grade. When I arrived in front of the detention room, I realized that I was the only one waiting. I then realized that I would be the only student in detention, alone with that math teacher who was a little obsessive. And it was getting dark outside, It was during late winter, early spring, so the night was early, and it was a big nope for me, and when I saw him coming, I panicked. I said something like, "I'm sorry, I have an emergency, I have to go. I'll email the school for rescheduling the detention hour." And I ran off. He started to yell at me that I had to obey him and go to detention, and that he would call my parents. At this moment, I didn't care. I sprinted towards the bus and caught my bus and went home. I was afraid that he would have called my parents, so when I arrived, I was shaking, but my parents greeted me normally, so I assumed that eventually he didn't call them. He never came back the next day, nor the next weeks. Eventually, I learned that he quit his position. A shrink came in during an hour to ask us if we wanted to talk about the math teacher, but as nobody knew what was going on with him, we didn't have much to say, and the shrink left, and we never heard of him again. Until a few months ago, I became a teacher. How ironic given my laziness when I was a teen, and one day chatting with my coworker, I mentioned his name, talking about my weird, bizarre math teacher and how I skipped a detention hour, and one of my oldest coworkers went very pale hearing his name. In fact, a few days after the detention hour incident, my math teacher was arrested for having downloaded quite a few videos and images of young children from the dark web and some kind of snuff movies starring children and young teens. Maybe this detention hour was just a detention hour and I would have gone out of it without any problem. But now I will never know, and will always wonder what would have happened if I stayed there and didn't catch my bus. I moved to Sandbach in Cheshire, England around 3 to 4 years ago with my ex. Him and I had broken up by this point, and we were just friends in the house we rented, and everything was great. We weren't hostile towards each other, and I found out we were better friends than in a relationship. I started going out to the bars and local shops and make friends and see if anyone was as lonely as me by this point. I had moved from Chelsea, London to be with my ex, and I didn't know anyone there. This was when I met Craig. Him and I became best friends quickly. He was a little odd, had family in the area in his own flat. So my ex moved away back with his family and I couldn't afford the rent on my own. So Craig and I rented our own house in Worcester, where his dad lived. His dad would be 5 minutes drive away from the house that we settled at. Him and I were just best friends. We didn't do anything romantically, and he always had a few poor girls in tow. He would tell each of them that they were the one for him, he loved them, etc. He had around 7 girls on the go at one point. I started seeing this guy Jay. He would stay over a few times and would eventually become my boyfriend. Craig hated it. We would argue about him. The fact that why should he care anyway? Him and I were only best friends and he needed to stay out of my dating life. It was then that things got physical. One night, Craig literally got on top of me in my room, put his knees on my arms and started to strangle me. He was saying things like, "Where is he now?" And I honestly thought that I was going to die. My brain switched to my mom, who was 4 to 5 hours away, and she would never know or would have to come identify the body of her only child. I don't know what it was, but I managed to kick Craig and I ran. He had double-locked the front door. He had hidden my bag and had smashed my new iPhone that I had gotten from my parents for my birthday. I was literally running down the stairs with him in tow, yelling how he's going to kill me. It went 0 to 100 real quick. I knew the back door was open from him having a smoke earlier and there was a garden gate. All I needed to do was open that. I ran for it, opened it, and made it. The next thing, I'm out on the street in short shorts and pajama top barefoot, and I just ran. I ran for a good half an hour towards town and used a payphone to call 999. The police picked me up. I couldn't get back into the house as Craig had my door key. I told them the story. They took me to the station, had to unlock it as it was past 1 in the morning by now. They took photos of my neck that had bruising and my head that was bleeding where he had smashed me into the kitchen wall earlier. I had to sit in a patrol car to go to my house and they picked Craig up. He was on the streets looking for me. I had to point him out and say, "That's him," to them. He said he was out looking for me as he was worried about me. And I don't think that's true. I think he was out looking for me to silence me so I didn't tell anyone. They arrested him, and I got told that he would stay in a cell overnight and a policeman would let me into my house as they used a key Craig had. While I was in the house alone, I gathered my things. I left my laptop, some clothes, shoes, and makeup in the rush. I thought I could easily replace them, and I just wanted to get away, and I was so worried that he would come back any second through the front door. I had no purse, no money, no phone. My parents lived 5 hours away. Thankfully, I don't know why, but I had the sense to hide my car key and my bra earlier that evening. I got into my car and drove to Morrison's petrol station. I was bleeding from my head, no shoes on and bruised. I broke down there and used their phone to call my mom. At first she was annoyed that I had woken her up, but then I explained everything to her. She ended up putting £200 into the petrol cashier's account for me to fill my car up, get some food and a hot drink to calm down. I then drove to my parents. I later got told through friends of a friend that Craig got released in the morning, as it was his word against mine, and he smashed my laptop up when he found out I wasn't home anymore. Whatever. My stuff got replaced, and I'm now with an amazing guy who treats me like a queen. Sometimes I get flashbacks of the night where I truly believe I could have died. As for Craig, I blocked him, deleted everything to do with his family and him, changed my number, and even broke off friendships with friends that knew me and him. I'm a 27-year-old female, and this story takes place 10 years ago when I was 17. I had just started university and was excited about having a fresh new start since I've always been a nerdy outcast in high school. I never had a boyfriend before. I've never even been on a date, so I was naive and optimistic about boys. My introverted and awkward personality hadn't magically changed since entering university, so it's safe to say that I didn't meet any interesting guys at school. One night, I was in my room working on an assignment on my laptop when I received a request on MSN Messenger. The email address was a boy's name with some numbers. The name was clearly ethnic and likely someone of the same origin as me. Intrigued, I accepted. For the sake of the story, we'll call this boy Ken. We got to chatting and I asked him how he gotten my email address, and he dodged the question. I let it go, not thinking too much of it. This was from a time when it was normal to accept anyone and everyone as a friend on Facebook and other social media platforms. As Ken and I continued to talk, I learned that he lived in my city and apparently wasn't much older than me. As I guessed, our roots were in fact in the same country. Let's call it Motherland. I asked him why he didn't have a picture of himself on his display picture, and this prompted him to suggest that we turn on our webcams because he wanted to see me too. I declined, but he insisted. Somehow he convinced me and we both switched on our webcams. I was pleasantly surprised and somewhat relieved to see that Ken was a good-looking, young guy chatting to me from the comfort of his bedroom, seemingly very normal. Our MSN chats carried on for a couple of weeks. They developed into texts and we even had a few phone calls after I had agreed to give him my phone number. I started to develop a crush on Ken. He'd asked me to go out with him a couple of times, but I was always pretty busy with school and our schedules weren't lining up. Finally, we found one afternoon when we were both free and decided to schedule a lunch date. Ken had a car and offered to pick me up from my university after I was done for the day. I was a little too dressed up for my C+ programming class, but just right for the lunch date that we had planned at a local vegetarian restaurant. Stupidly, I didn't tell any of my friends where I was going or with whom because I was embarrassed about going on my very first date, at almost age 18, with someone who had randomly added me on MSN. I waited outside my building when a black car with heavily tinted windows pulled up beside me. The passenger side window rolled down and sure enough, there was Ken, sitting in the driver's seat. I was happy to see that he was as cute in person as he was on webcam. However, what I wasn't expecting was the intense smell of marijuana floating out of the car. Not relevant, but part of the first impression. Admittedly, I was a bit taken aback and was concerned that he might be driving high. He unlocked the doors and motioned for me to get in, so I did without dispute. As I sat down in the passenger seat, and he immediately put his hand on my thigh, I nervously shifted my leg away. "So, I started. "Do you know where the restaurant is? I can guide you if you want." He smirked at me and didn't say anything but just started driving. Okay, kinda weird. I thought maybe he was just kinda nervous or awkward, both of which I could sympathize with, so I let it be. I was about to try my hand at a little small talk, which I'm no good at, when I noticed him heading towards the highway ramp. I started to worry because the restaurant was not far from my campus and there was no reason for us to be getting on the highway. You don't need to take the highway. The restaurant's really close by. I can guide you." I tried to keep my voice steady, but I could hear my own nervousness. Ken finally spoke for the first time since I had gotten into the car. "I thought maybe we could go to my place instead. We can play Need for Speed and I can make you lunch." I was 17 on my way to the house of a guy that I just met for the first time, and I hadn't told anyone where I was going. My mind was racing. I knew that this would be an utterly stupid thing to do. Despite the clear red flags waving in my face, I decided that I didn't want to ruin our first date by rejecting his offer to make me lunch and play Need for Speed together, which I told him that I liked playing. So, like an idiot, I reluctantly agreed to avoid being rude. We made it to his house. It was apparently his family's home and was situated in a sort of shady neighborhood. We stepped inside and, of course, no one was home except us. It was sparsely furnished and looked unkempt, which struck me as pretty odd for a family home. He informed me that his Xbox was in his bedroom. I hesitated in the doorway, but he sat at the foot of his bed in front of the TV and patted the empty space beside him for me to have a seat. There was literally nowhere else to sit in his room, so I cautiously sat down, keeping as much distance as I could between us. I started to relax as we played Need for Speed, and he made us PB&Js to munch on. I was about to laugh at myself for being overly paranoid when Ken did something bizarre. He got onto the bed and sat down directly behind me, his legs on either side of me in an extremely awkward position, and tried to guide my hands to the controller. I started to ask him what he was doing, and, as if this wasn't uncomfortable enough, his hands moved from the controller and slid under my shirt. That's when I really started to panic. I thought he was going to try to grope my chest, but instead he started squeezing and massaging my belly. I was more than a little chubby back then, freshman 15 and then some, so you can imagine what that might have been like. I dropped the controller in pure shock and quickly stood up, fixing my shirt. I was at a loss for words, and he did nothing but smirk at me and tell me he liked it. I felt completely disgusted and violated, and I'd had enough. I lied and told him that I had a group project to work on and needed to go. He asked where I lived, so he could drop me home. Thankfully, I had the common sense not to tell him, and I asked him to drop me back at the school instead, where I would be supposedly meeting my classmates, and he obliged. After our very uncomfortable first date, I decided I didn't want to talk to Ken anymore. I didn't block him on MSN or on my phone, our only two methods of communication, but I rarely responded to his messages and I ignored all of his calls. Once, he messaged me on MSN at around 11 p.m., asking me to come over and telling me that he would send me a cab to bring me over to his place. Thoroughly annoyed, I responded, "What do you take me for? Why do you even think I would want to do that?" He replied saying, "Nothing creepy, I promise." It was bizarre. I was disgusted and didn't even respond. He continued trying to get in touch with me for months and then suddenly vanished. I figured he'd finally gotten the point. Now, I wish the story ended here, but it didn't. The last I heard from Ken in late February, he had stopped trying to contact me shortly after Valentine's Day. In April, 2 nuclear family members and I went on holiday to visit another relative who we'll call Anne, who was living in the Caribbean at the time. Anne, whom I loved dearly, was and still is a bit of an eccentric. She considered herself very spiritual and is an active member of a large, well-known spiritual organization. She's deeply connected with the motherland, more than the rest of us are, and goes back for frequent visits. While we stayed with her in the Caribbean, she told us about her most recent spiritual trips to the motherland, where she met a wealthy and well-connected local woman through the organization, who quickly became a very close friend. Let's call her Connie, the con artist. During our visit, Annie introduced us to Connie virtually over Skype, because Connie lives in the motherland, and we chatted with her a couple of times throughout our vacation via Skype and got to know her a little bit. Little did we know then that Connie, who Anne had spontaneously met halfway across the world in the motherland, would soon wreak utter havoc on our lives. Now that's a story that I'm just not and may never be ready to tell because of how many lives were affected and the severity of the damage that had been inflicted. What you need to know is that Connie was an outright criminal and con artist who had been targeting our family for long before Anne had actually met her. Their meeting was not coincidence. Not only did she manage to steal over $100,000 from our family, but she took any peace of mind or sense of security we'd ever had. When we finally caught on and confronted her, she insisted that we were mistaken, but disappeared into thin air once we forced her out of our lives. You're probably wondering what on earth this has to do with the story about Ken. Well, get this. The situation with Connie lasted many months. The whole thing is kind of a blur to me now, but we first spoke to her online in April, and I remember the whole ordeal lasting well into the fall. While she normally resided in the motherland, Anne had invited her to visit and stay with us where my whole family and I presently live. That's when things really took a turn for the worst. Some of the things I clearly remember and are important to the story were that, 1, the whole time she was staying with us, she was trying to convince me to transfer schools to a very obscure school and program in the U.S. I don't even live in the U.S., and was actually getting very pushy about it. And 2, she had asked me if I was a virgin and told me to save myself from my husband. It was kind of disturbing to be saying that. During this time, I was so emotionally drained and stressed that I didn't really think of anything but the situation at hand. In fact, I had stopped socializing almost entirely and even started habitually skipping classes. I had lost contact with my high school friends and my university friends who were too new to really care, so my strange behavior and new destructive habits went unnoticed. Fast forward to one day after Connie's final disappearance in the fall, I was at home with my dad when my cell phone rang. I looked at the caller ID and it was a number I didn't have saved, so it was showing the contact information as whatever name the phone was registered under. My heart dropped in my stomach. My phone displayed a name. The first name was a man's name and the last name was the same last name as Connie's. I started to panic and ran into my bedroom to answer the call. I had no idea what to expect. When I picked up the phone, I was greeted by a familiar voice. It was Ken. I honestly thought that I was going to puke when I came to a sudden realization that he had been part of this whole sick plot. Of course, I don't have hard evidence to prove that he was connected to Connie, but let me explain. The timing of his appearance and reappearance into my life, the last name, a fairly unique surname originating from the part of the motherland where Connie is from, and I had never known Ken's last name until then, and the fact that he contacted me out of the blue and I had no idea why or how were all just too bizarre to be a mere coincidence. Of course, I freaked out at Ken when he called, and I told him that if he ever called me again, I would call the police. His response was just a weird, dry half-laugh, and then he said, "Well, okay then," in the most creepy voice you can think of, and hung up. I knew in my gut that this was their last attempt to get back in touch and somehow slither their way back into mine and my family's lives. Thankfully, I never heard from Ken again after that day. A while after this all ended, I was having a conversation with a family member who was also closely involved in all of this about the whole ordeal, and she told me that she'd sensed something extremely wrong when Connie was pushing to have me sent off to the U.S., to that obscure school. She had an unshakable feeling that Connie was involved in some sort of human trafficking scene and that, if I left, she would never see me again. The horrifying pieces came together for me at that time. I was just too naive to have seen it before. The memories flooded back when I heard that, how Ken had told me, "Nothing weird, I promise," when he invited me over, and how Connie was telling me to remain a virgin. As I said, I had never told a soul about Ken, nor about the weird V-card conversation with Connie. I strongly and firmly believed that Ken had been some sort of player in Connie's game and was just there to keep me away from guys and prevent me from having a boyfriend. For those who may have been wondering, we never called the police on Connie or Ken because nothing illegal happened at face value. It's very hard to explain. I'll also mention that I tried to find Ken online many times after this all ended. I don't know why, I felt like I wanted to expose him or call him out, and was not able to find even a sliver of information on him, not by the name Ken nor by the name on the caller ID. It was as if he didn't even exist. Also, I am awful at directions and didn't remember his address or where his house was exactly. I'm sorry if this is all convoluted. I'm trying to get my points across without giving out any names or too many details, which makes it a little challenging. I hope this can serve as a warning to young people to never trust anyone, to do your thorough checks on people, especially those you meet online, and to be very aware and wary of people's intentions. From this incident onward, I can't stomach a lot of those spiritual organizations. I never liked the idea of them to begin with, but now I've truly experienced how they can attract both vulnerable people and also unsavory characters who are looking for someone vulnerable to prey on. No judgment for those who are into that sort of thing, it's just definitely not for me. I'd like to hear what you guys think about this. Do you think my suspicions are plausible? What do you make of this? I'm currently staying in a remote part of the United Kingdom and having a break from working, which means more time to pursue my hobbies, one being photography. I had scoped out a creepy-looking tree formation in a nearby forest and set my camera and tripod up as the sun was coming down, for that extra creepy vibe. As I'm happily taking photos, I see a woman pass the entrance to the arched trees. This woman had parked her car next to mine when I arrived. She went past a couple of times, looking at me for prolonged periods with each time she passed. I assume she wants to come up this path, but sees that I'm taking photos, so decides to walk elsewhere. Approximately 5 minutes go by and she appears again, this time walking towards me, dragging her left side slightly with this strange limp. She stops once and stares at me for a few seconds, then starts walking towards me again. I ask her if she's okay. I'm starting to put my camera away at this point and readying my tripod to use for self-defense if necessary because the vibe I'm getting is way off, and she starts grunting at me, then stops and stares again. It's at this point that this woman is close enough for me to realize that she's actually a man in woman's clothing with a wig. An uncomfortable moment passes and she starts grunting again, walks towards the edge of the path, grabs a pile of leaves and starts throwing them around, grunts some more and then walks off aimlessly into the forest. I call my friend to tell her what has happened and ask that she stays on the phone in case this person comes back. I'll just take a couple more photos, then I'm out. For a good 10 minutes I hear the crunching of leaves circling me in the forest and I just convince myself that it's the wildlife. Then, silence. I take the photos and I haven't seen or heard the person for around 15 minutes now, so I assume I'm safe. I leave the path and see that the car had gone. Thank God. However, I very quickly notice that there is a man walking towards me from the entrance. It's the same guy. He had changed into men's attire, and as he walks past me, he shoots me a grin that sends shivers down my spine. I don't scare easily, but this guy just gives off all of the wrong signals, causing this overwhelming feeling of dread to wash over me. I'm still on the phone at this point, and I'm holding my tripod over my shoulder just in case. I quickened my pace and got back into my car. As I did so, I saw him come out of the lane that I had been down, stop and look, then start walking towards my car with intent. I start videoing for a while, then haul it out of there, driving past his car that he had moved down the road, thinking, what in the gray beard F just happened? Limping, leaf-throwing, forest stalker who cross-dresses. I hope we don't meet again. For context, I'm a 5'3", 24-year-old female and working as a programmer for an IT company in the Philippines. Now, the area where my office is comprises of 3 buildings. Building A, where my office is in, Building B, and Building C. To get to the other building, it would take you like around 10 minutes to get there. This happened to me a year ago around the end of February into March. I just got out of a bad breakup at that time, and I really intended to just focus on myself and not meet anyone yet. I just got out of work and it's around 7 p.m. on a Friday night and went to my usual waiting spot, which has benches and is located at the back of a building near the entrance of the underground parking lot for our company's shuttle, and Omar, our shuttle dispatcher, is there. Now, I've known Omar for 2 years and is someone I considered now as a friend, and we would often chat about our lives, even the breakup with my ex then, and joke around. He's a 40-plus-year-old guy, and he gives out this big fatherly vibe, so he is really someone that I trust. That night, he was there and with someone new that I didn't recognize. Our convo went like this. "Oh, hey there. Good thing you're here. I'd like you to meet someone since he told me he really wants to meet you for a long time now." And then this guy stood up and shook my hand. I greeted him as just to be polite, and this new guy, let's call him Ray, he's average looking and a little shorter than my height, about 5'1", and he's instantly giving off a vibe as soon as I shook his hand. I thought that would be the end of it, but he proceeded to talk to me for a few minutes while I wait for my shuttle to arrive. Omar has purposely left me and this Ray guy so that we could talk and get to know each other. I'm actually puzzled at this point. One, I have no clue who this guy is and why he would be so eager to meet me. And two, I clearly told Omar before that I'm not into meeting anyone just yet. But for the sake of being polite and nice, I talked to Ray, but we never reached any personal questions, exchanging numbers, social media accounts, or even telling him my full name. I just told him my nickname, and I left it just as that when I finally got on the shuttle. Fast forward to a week and Friday again. I got off at work at the same time and, surprise, surprise, Ray is there again with Omar and a security guard. They were chatting, but as soon as I came, Ray instantly greeted me, and at that point, I'm a little creeped out as I expected our encounter would only be a one-time thing. I just said hi and brushed him off and sat on the benches to wait for my shuttle again, and of course, as this guy doesn't seem to know the definition of personal space, sat beside me and talked to me again, but this time he's asking for my cell phone number. I told him off and clearly said that I'm not giving out my number to strangers and just giving him one-word answers just to give an impression that I wasn't interested at all. He would ask, "Why wouldn't you give your number? I just want to be friends," and I could see in his face that he was getting frustrated every time I told him I wasn't giving it to him. This happened while Omar and the security guard was looking at us from afar, but this went on until I got on the shuttle again. As soon as I got home, I mindlessly scrolled through my timeline and saw a notification that I have a new friend request, and guess what? It's Ray, and he even messaged me with a "please accept my friend request." I just deleted his request, but now I'm pretty shocked since I didn't tell him my Facebook account, so how did he manage to find me? The following day was the last straw when I decided to get off at an earlier time so that I could avoid him, but to my surprise, he was there, again, waiting for me, along with Omar and the security guard. Ray immediately ran up to me to say hi, but I brushed him off and dreaded the fact that I would have to wait with this creep again when I saw my shuttle wasn't there yet. He immediately asked if I accepted his Facebook request, and I decided to play dumb and said I haven't been active on Facebook and haven't seen any requests. He got disappointed and he fiddled with his phone for a bit and then revealed his phone to show my Facebook profile and asked me if this was me. I said yes, and this time, I was completely ignoring him at this point and playing with my phone and told him I wasn't going to accept his request because I don't know him. And then Ray grabbed my phone out of my hands angrily and said that he was going to add himself using my Facebook account if I won't. I muttered an actual WTF and grabbed my phone from him, and with perfect timing, I got on the shuttle in a hurry and told the driver to go. At this point, I could confirm this guy could be stalking me and now knows my daily schedule and social media accounts. I reported this incident to my manager and told her how this has already been happening for some time now. She was surprised I didn't report it earlier, but I blamed it on my lack of assertiveness and fear that I would be overreacting to his advances. We reported this incident to office security and told them what happened and that they couldn't do anything at first as, one, I needed actual evidence about my allegations about him, and two, I only knew Ray by his first name and they would need more information than that. I didn't bother to ask where he's from or if he's even working in our office and building, which is dumb of me and I should have asked in the first place. My manager then decided that I should at least be accompanied by some of my office mates to confirm the situation, and the guys volunteered to accompany me every time I got off of work. They accompanied me for a few days, and no matter what time I got out, Ray was there to harass me. I felt bad for my office mates as they had to deal with his BS as well. First instance, when he saw I was with my office mates, I could see the visible anger in his eyes, and he would try to butt in our conversations even if we were ignoring him. At one point, when I'm talking with my office mates, he lets out an exasperated sigh and said, "Can I just talk to you for a second, please?" "What do you want?" "I just want to talk to you. If you don't, I'll leave." "Okay." And then I went back to talking to my office mates. He butted in once more and asked that I should introduce him to my office mates when I didn't. He proceeded to introduce himself instead, which irked me and my office mates as his behavior doesn't seem normal at all. After that incident, my office mates and I told my manager what happened and how dangerous this guy might actually be. She decided that we should escalate it to HR and have them deal with it immediately. Gladly, HR responded and took the situation seriously and began to do an investigation on who Ray might actually be. Same day, they sent an email that, after searching through records, turns out Ray wasn't an employee of our office, and they might need to talk to building security to find out more about this guy. HR also requested our office security to escort me and observe the situation. I honestly felt relieved, as now I felt safe for the first time, while they searched who Ray might actually be. He still showed up even if I got out late or earlier than usual, but never went near me when I saw I was accompanied by security, but he would just keep his distance and stare at me, smile creepily, and linger outside my shuttle until it left. HR contacted me for a meeting with them and with my manager about some news on Ray, and I was shocked by the information that they'd found out. Ray was not an employee of our building or office, but in fact, a temp in the security office of Building C. I then thought, okay, this creep is really putting an effort for someone who is clearly not interested, and if he's a temp, meaning there's a chance I won't be able to see him after this. But then, what HR said chilled me to the bone. He was a temp assigned to work on the security cameras, meaning he had access to all the building's cameras. It has been his way to spy on me, and the reason why he was able to be there at the exact time I got out. HR has already spoken to his supervisor and gave him a warning to Ray, and of course Ray denied the allegations even if I had witnesses against him. The supervisor wanted to apologize to me in person, but I decided not to, as I just wanted this to be over with. After that meeting, I never saw Ray again, and I reckon he must have been kicked out after HR issued warning against him. And as for Omar, I had never seen him as well, and I felt bad, but he was also part of the people who enabled Ray and didn't do anything when I was clearly getting harassed. I received a bit of backlash from security guards in the building for a while as well, hearing them say that I was overreacting and I should have accepted his advances, which was disgusting as I heard the same thing being said by female building staff as well. Nothing strange happened for a few days, but then the security guard that was with Omar at the time when Ray was harassing me added me on Facebook, but I didn't make much of it and just deleted the request. I'm still working in the same office as the building as of today and have been totally shaken up by the incident, and that I decided to just keep my distance from people so I could avoid from this ever happening again. So I, a 33-year-old female, live at a funeral home owned and run by my dad. I live in the apartment upstairs and do some side work for my dad, but I don't work for the funeral home outright. Since I live here, though, I tend to interact with a lot of people who are here for funeral-related things and whatnot. I represent my dad when I'm speaking to someone here, so I'm always nice and helpful. Had a couple of crazy people I've dealt with, but nothing like this. This was in mid-March, sometime because it was right at the beginning of the whole COVID takeover. I had gone to pick up some food for my family at around 6. Unless there is a service, the employees are usually gone, and I believe it was a Saturday as well. So I pull into my parking lot, and as I park, a car drives by me going towards the entrance's side. It was a dark SUV, and there are so many people who work here who have similar cars that I couldn't see from that far who it was, but I gave a quick wave thinking it was someone I knew. Bad idea. So the car stops and the guy gets out. Like I said, I'm used to having to help people and tell them where they can drop things off or pick stuff up. So this guy gets out and comes towards my car. I rolled my window down a little, expecting to just say hello and tell him that no one is here working. He comes right over to my window and starts leaning in and peering into my car, which was a red flag already. It was very invasive. I'm glad my doors were locked and I only put it down a little. So this dude basically had his head in my car and it creeped me out. But before anything else, his eyes scared the life out of me. He was very, very pale with bright red hair, and his eyes were literally the craziest and scary eyes I've ever seen. It was chilling. I don't know if he was on drugs or just nuts, but I'm already uncomfortable at this point. So he starts to talk to me and asks me if I work here, blah blah blah. I tell him no one is here working, please call tomorrow in the morning and you can speak to someone. Thought that would be it. Not even close. This man came to bring an application to my father to work for the funeral home. He was apparently in IT or something, but had studied embalming and also volunteered for the Red Cross. He was talking a mile a minute, and I was so incredibly uncomfortable, but even more so when he started to tell me about how certain embalming techniques he studied included hanging cadavers by their feet and other insane, sick stuff. He had absolutely no experience embalming, though. He cornered me in my car for 15 minutes and just rambled. I told him several times, please just call tomorrow morning, I really can't help you. So now I'm sitting here in my car with this insane man outside my car, and I also had food on my seat. He was looking into my car, so he saw it, and you would think he would take the hint. At some point, I texted my husband and said, come outside now. And thank God he actually saw my text and came out. So he comes out up to this guy, and he was like, can I help you? So this guy starts cornering my husband also. This guy had absolutely no idea what personal space was, and my husband kept backing up, and he would move in closer every time. I took an opportunity to grab the food and get out since he was outside. When I got out, he started telling my husband and I, this virus is going to be around and there's going to be bodies piling up. They're going to need extra help here when there are hundreds of bodies dead. It almost seemed like he was excited at the thought. He had a resume, and I told him multiple times to please bring it by again. I didn't even want to touch anything he had, but he forced it into my husband's hands. I went to the stairs and gave my husband a concerned look and motioned for him to come in. This guy made me so extremely nervous, and I didn't want my husband out there any longer. But this guy was almost impossible to walk away from. He didn't understand that it was done. So eventually we got away from this freak and got inside. I immediately called my dad to explain what had happened and warn him of this guy. I told my dad I had never felt more uncomfortable in my life, and there was something seriously wrong with this dude. I wanted to warn him that he would probably be back the next day. And he did. A couple of days later, mid-morning, I'm upstairs in my apartment and there are several employees in the office upstairs. I hear someone ring the doorbell. Once, twice, 3 times. He then proceeds to ring it non-stop for 15 minutes. They assumed it was him and didn't answer. I went out and I was like, what's up with this doorbell? They knew it was him apparently because he had called earlier and wanted to talk to my dad, and one of the employees told him we are hiring, but he insisted on talking to my father, so he came by. Then after the doorbell went off for several minutes, the phone started ringing off the hook. Next, he was going around to all the windows and pounding on them relentlessly. I told them how crazy he was, but I was glad they could now see what I meant and that I wasn't overreacting. Eventually, my older brother went down with a mask on, and like I said, this was right in the beginning, and people weren't even wearing masks regularly, but this guy had zero boundaries. He then cornered my brother the same way and would not let him leave and end the conversation. We're all just thinking, God, what's wrong with this guy? My dad did not want to talk to him, but he wouldn't give up. And the next day, he comes back again. Same thing, banging on all the windows and ringing the bell, calling incessantly. Eventually, my dad's secretary answered the phone and put him in his place and told him if he called again, they would call the cops. The best part is, every time he showed up, He showed up in a full top-to-bottom biker gear, spandex helmets, knee pads. Even though he apparently lived a few streets over, this guy was just absolutely nuts. Hey friends, thanks for listening. Click that notification bell to be alerted of all future narrations. If you got a story, be sure to submit them to my subreddit, r/LetsReadOfficial, and give and receive feedback from the community, and maybe even hear your story featured on the next video. And join my Discord to interact with me and other listeners directly. And if you want to support me even more, grab early access to all future narrations for just $1 a month on Patreon, and maybe even pick up some Let's Read merch on Spreadshirt. And check out the Let's Read podcast, where you can hear all these stories in long compilation form and save huge on data, located anywhere you listen to podcasts. Links in the bio. Thanks so much, friends, and remember, an ankle up the tush cures sprains.